I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Forrester, are there any additions to the agenda?
Yes, Council President Uffelman, I've outlined below item 4 on council business, a consideration of a proclamation for Constitution Week sponsored by Mayor Beebe. So that will be item 4.5.
Thank you. All right. A consent agenda has been circulated. Are there any questions or concerns? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Second. It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Again, any questions or concerns? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Next on the agenda, we have visitors' appearances and requests. There will be another opportunity at the end of the meeting. Please respect the 3-minute limit. Would anyone like to speak to the council? Is there anyone online that would like to speak to the council? Hearing none, we will move on. Council presentations, I don't know that there are any. Does anyone have one to make? Hearing none, let's move on to council business. Intent to award a purchase of sewer Vector truck, Mr. Kaiser and Lori Hooper Antrim.
Thank you. Good evening, Council. Lori Hooper Antrim, Finance Director for the record. In your council packet is a staff report for the purchase of a vacuum truck. This is a budgeted item for FY26 in the amount of $650,000. And currently there's an approximate wait time of 6 months from the time the truck is ordered to the time the truck is delivered. The Public Works Department has gotten 2 Sourcewell quotes, and the Sourcewell contract meets procurement requirements. Through the Sourcewell contract, the city can acquire the equipment needed for $638,834. If approved, the vacuum truck will be funded in the Public Works Support Service Fund, where there's an approved budget for the purchase, and the future sale of the current vacuum truck will further offset the costs. The purchase of the vacuum truck was budgeted to be financed through an internal borrowing from the general fund in the amount of $500,000. And currently staff is doing their due diligence to ensure that that is the best possible route for acquiring the equipment. The financing of the equipment will be brought to council at a future meeting. Payments not due until closer to the delivery of the equipment, so there's time to see if interest rates come down. Casey can speak to the need of the truck and the truck specifications.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Good evening, Council. For the record, Casey Kaiser, City of Prineville Public Works Director, Assistant City Manager. So this is probably one of our most used pieces of equipment in the public works fleet out there. We use this equipment daily. So this is, as Lori mentioned, this is a vacuum truck. So we use this for hydro excavation. So this is we can do precise excavating in tight areas around other utilities. This is the equipment that we use for cleaning out things like sewer lines, storm drains, culverts, anything like that. So we use it a lot for just general utilities locating. And like I said, it goes out a couple of times a day. The current unit that we have is a Vector truck, and this new unit that we would like to purchase is a VATCon truck. It's a little bit different brand, but this currently has a little bit better price or parts availability. So the Vector truck, ours is starting to get old and we've had to do some repairs to it. We've had a hard time getting parts for it. The VATCon unit has much better parts availability. Both SMAF and Taylor Northwest use these VATCon units. It also has a 2-stage fan in it, so it's a little more powerful on the vacuum side. So we're able to actually run this deeper down into wet wells and submerge the suction hose into water. So it'll be a more effective piece of equipment for us as well. So happy to answer any questions, but I think that's what I have to add.
I just wanted to add that city staff is recommending the approval of the purchase of the vacuum truck for the from Environment Clean Equipment in the amount of $638,834. And like he said, we would be willing to answer any questions.
Are there any questions from the council? Yes.
Any estimate on what the value is on the old one?
For the budgeting purposes, we estimated that we would get $150,000 out of the sale of it. We'll likely sell that through a vendor that facilitates auctions of public property, or we'll auction it. That value is ascertained by kind of looking at just a broad cross-section of units on the market. So I think that's a pretty conservative number. I feel relatively confident that we'll get somewhere in that ballpark for it.
Other questions? No. The point I wanted to bring up, again, that I asked you earlier before the meeting, there's only a 1% difference between the two units. And not knowing anything about the details of these pieces of equipment, is the lesser priced unit actually the preferred unit, not just because of the price, but because it is under the present circumstances, a better vehicle than the other?
Yeah, that's a great question. And as you've identified, there's a pretty small difference in price, but we think there's a big difference in performance. And really the two big things are just the additional power and performance of this rig and the parts availability.
Any other questions? Hearing none, would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll move that the city staff recommends approving the purchase for the city staff. The city council will approve the purchase of the vacuum truck from Enviro Clean Equipment in the amount of $638,834.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded.
For the approval of the purchase.
Getting ahead of myself.
Again, any questions, concerns by the council at all? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you, council.
Look forward to having the new rig in 6 months. Okay. Moving on, adopting the Transportation System Plan TSP update. This is a public hearing. And Mr. Smith,
President, I would ask the public hearing be opened before he testifies.
okay? I will open the public hearing for this presentation.
Good evening, council. For the record, Joshua Smith, Planning Director, City of Prineville. So this is our 2025 Transportation Systems Plan. It's been a long time coming, so I'm going to kind of run through mostly for the public, since many of you haven't been involved in these before, kind of what a transportation plan is, and well, I got a slide for that. What the goals of it are, how it's developed, what the purposes of a transportation plan are, and then some of the code updates that are going along with this to kind of close the project itself. Ask any questions while I'm going through. If a slide comes up and you want to ask a question, that's not a problem. And then in your packet, there's also a planning commission recommendation that I will get to at the end and kind of go through those items. So what's a TSP? Well, TSP is a Transportation Systems Plan. It is one of our satellite documents to our comprehensive plan. So our comp plan has a bunch of chapters and policies, and then we have satellite documents like our water, wastewater, transportation parks. These are satellite documents because they're much larger to put into a small binder. So these are kind of a 20-year vision of what we should do for our traffic situation in town with regard to not only vehicles, but also pedestrian, bikes, freight, aviation, everything. So there's a specific transportation planning rule in the ORS. That's actually, there's an ORS that leads to the OAR. And that transportation planning rule basically guides how these documents are created and have to perform. And the consultant has done that. They put these together all the time, and then we review them as the local body to make sure they're compliant with what our vision is for the community. what it looks at, driving, walking, biking, freight, public transit is actually starting to become more of, as we grow, it's becoming more of a factor in town. This particular transportation plan had 3 focus areas when we started back in November 22. And actually before that, when this was just going to be a TGM grant. But the West Y was a specific target that we wanted to have a more solidified solution to. The O'Neill Junction was one we wanted to have a solution to instead of punting all the time. And then the Third Street corridor, kind of that, how do we reduce the congestion? Now, our old TSP already addressed some of that, and this one kind of bolsters those same criteria and has a lot of the same projects for that purpose. What's included, so goals and objectives. This will be the first time our transportation plan and our comp plan goals actually align. And I'll get to that in a minute. The project list is probably the biggest focus of a transportation plan that determines our SDC, our system development charge for the transportation when everybody builds homes and businesses. That project list is what creates that methodology, which will come back to you later on when we determine that SDC amount. But that project list is how we develop anything from subdivisions to large data centers on the hill and what they must create, like with the roundabout at Tom McCall. That was something that was part of that initial transportation planning that they had to contribute to. Without this plan, there's nothing to focus that on. Road classifications. This is another key component of a transportation plan that basically dictates how different streets get built. We have a standards and specifications that determine what a major collector is, collector, residential, arterial, and they each have their own criteria on how they get built. So that's a key component. Funding forecast, like I mentioned, that's the project list. And then these all influence our code updates in our comp plan and our land use code in general. How was it developed? So like I said, this started back in November 22. We were applied for a TGM grant, and that basically morphed into, let's just do a TSP update. Our previous update was November 2023. I don't remember the month. And so they just said, let's just do a whole plan. You need to redo the whole thing anyway. So we started November 22, and it's been a little over 2 years now, almost 3 by the time this gets adopted. Lots of public meetings, lots of public advisory meetings. Planning Commission, we had a joint meeting here back in the fall of 24, summer of 24. Open houses, online open houses. So that all came together into this timeline, and we're sitting here in fall of 25. Like I mentioned, we did an online survey. This is the first time we did an online survey where you could actually apply a tag on a map and comment on what you're talking about. And that was probably the most interaction we had with the public. That was the most responses I think we've ever had. So we had 87 individual little tags and comments from the public on that one. The in-person open house was down at Golden Coffee. Wasn't 87 people there, but we had a good amount, 14, 15 people that came by, kind of perused what was going on, made some comments. The online survey was even less responses. That wasn't very, but it provided the opportunity for people to comment. The PAC meetings, these are advisory meetings for the consultant. So PAC meetings are put together by, I think we had some planning commissioner there. I think one of the council members was on that PAC. We had several people from Freight, ODOT, county. So anybody that has kind of a buy-in or skin in the game was generally on that PAC meeting, either in-house or on the virtual meeting. And they basically advise the consultant into what the public wants and those types of things.
I just want to make one comment. I do not intend on making any decisions following this public hearing. This is just a public hearing for
Correct.
us to hear it and for the community to be aware.
So this is the public hearing, the time for the last moment, the public can provide comment and the ordinance will be brought back at the next council meeting. Like I mentioned before, we had a planning commission joint meeting with the city council where kind of a draft was presented and then some guidance was provided. Public hearing for the planning commission was August 19th. And that's when planning commission made their recommendation to the council. Summary on the feedback, we got a lot of feedback on the West Y and O'Neill. I think O'Neill was probably the biggest. That and on Combs Flat, the south side of Combs Flat, where it comes out of Juniper Canyon. Those were the biggest concentrations of safety concerns. And then there were just general conversations about vehicular circulation. Walking, biking became a big top point of conversation, especially crossing Third Street. And then just those east-west routes, you know, Lynn Boulevard and the highway are pretty much the only two roads that connect most of town, east and west. Fifth Street currently doesn't go through, so some of those alternate routes were, a lot of comments were provided. Other areas, we got a lot of speeding comments, and public transit came up quite a bit with mostly our younger demographic trying to make it over to COCC, RPA, and some of those types of things, school related. What's in the Prineville TSP? So these are the 5 goals. Like I mentioned before, the goals in the comp plan had never meshed with the goals in our transportation plan. So that didn't make a lot of sense this go around. So we've actually revamped what chapter 6 looks like, and I'll get into that at the end. But these are the primary goals. So safety, efficiency, accessibility, walking and cycling routes. So a complete system, not just looking at focusing on one type of transportation. Economic development was a big one. So we want to make sure our transportation system actually promotes economic development. It doesn't hinder it in some way. System performance and minimize those impacts to kind of the natural environment. So a river, the creek, wetlands, the Barnes Butte, the Rimrock, whatever it might be that we consider to be our natural features. And the way it's structured, most TSPs are structured this way. So you start out with your existing conditions. Here's what we have. Here's what the future conditions look like in 20 years. And there's usually a no build scenario and a build scenario. And they show where intersections are failing, how things might look if we don't do anything, if we do something. And there's a lot of tables and jargon in there, but that's essentially how we look at those. And mostly those future conditions are connected to how intersections must be improved to handle that traffic. And then how we do our road extensions, 9th Street, Combs Flat, which is one of the reasons we did the Combs Flat extension, 5th Street extension, and things like that. If you do them, it looks like this. If you don't do them, it looks like this. And those are all mostly in the appendices, not in the main chapter. So you'll see these very large appendices at the end of the chapter or the end of the volume that gets more into more detail if you want to get down into the weeds. Then the projects that they address are kind of come after that whole project list, and it kind of shows in maps where those things are. So you can have a pretty good idea of what the system looks like just from a few visual maps. And then at the end, there's funding. Yeah, go ahead.
We change slides. So is the road systems that were failing, is that the West Y and O'Neill and then the Third Street and 26? And that's why they're on.
Yes, so there's a volume to capacity ratios that every intersection goes through. And it's actually on an A, B, C, D, E schedule. Like, so A is great, B, C. We will actually allow ourselves to go down to an F before we make a fix. And so certain legs of an intersection might be failing, like the left-hand turns, but the rest of it might be fine. So there's a detailed table on those. And these aren't necessarily, like, to answer your question, this is not necessarily the intersections that are failing. But they do go through the major ones and show that, hey, the left-hand turn going westbound is failing. All the other ones are at a B level, but this one's at an F. So that would be like 9th and Main Street going westbound or going northbound. Those movements are failing. 7th onto Main Street going southbound is failing. So those types of things are recognized, and then we look at projects that would alleviate those, whether it's right there at the intersection or somewhere else in the city where we can draw traffic away. Funding and implementation strategy comes last, and that's where we talk about how much money all these projects would cost. So just some highlights. Like I said, we concentrated really on the West Y and the O'Neill. That was a big lift in this plan. The picture on the right you see is kind of the 30% design that they came up with. This roundabout design actually goes back to our 05 transportation plan, when they first kind of showed the concept, but it was a very crude drawing and a very large drawing. This actually looked at traffic flow and how it might actually connect into frontage roads and down by Meadow Lakes, how it connects into all the businesses and all those types of things. So by no means a final plan, but it kind of gets to the idea. You see, it's a single lane. There are slip lanes involved in this, so you can actually both slide around. So this isn't a true double roundabout. It's a single lane roundabout with right-hand turn lanes. A true double lane, you can go all the way around in both lanes. And so there's a semantics to that. This is showing kind of that ultimate solution. You can do various iterations of this where maybe you don't do those slip lanes first, but they wanted to show that it could fit and function. And then how these Second Street bypass would connect, how would Meadow Lakes connect over here, how this frontage road would work.
What's that lower circle do? Josh?
It's a turnaround, so they were trying to figure out how you get traffic to circulate through, and that's a concept that was come up. One of the other plans actually brings it around. You can faintly see proposed access to Second Street, where instead of that, you would just go through, or maybe you'd keep that for a fire turnaround, whatnot. They're just trying to get that circulation to continue through and activate Second Street and still allow Meadow Lakes to function normally.
Well, and have access to those few businesses
These,
right in there. That
you know, that's what I'm surprised, like in this one, they didn't do that on the north end, and that's something we'd probably, I mean, these little driveways are probably not efficient. That would be something we'd go dig into further. Cost estimate between 10 to 15, 25 million. This was the project that one of the planning commission recommendations was to, hey, maybe we should look at an interim solution and promote that if necessary. Because these projects, we sit there and say, okay, it's a 10-year long-term priority, and then at the end of 10 years, we go, we didn't do anything. So is there something in the interim that we could do to make it better so we can avoid some of those T-bone intersections, especially right here where that stop sign is, this merge lane that basically you can't see behind you? You know, are there things we can do that are very simple, maybe cost hundreds of thousands versus millions? So still possible, but this is the ultimate solution in the TSP. And then the O'Neill Junction, we've talked about this at length multiple times in different meetings, in different contexts. And the striping has mostly been done on the kind of the northwest side. The solution here on O'Neill, we looked at everything from closing off O'Neill to doing underpasses and overpasses. But ultimately what it comes down to is creating a protective median and allowing that traffic to turn left into a protected lane that they can then merge into traffic. So you're only concerned with the downstream side when turning left off O'Neill, which is where we're getting our accidents from. Those accidents were primarily coming from the fact that there was two lanes going up the hill. We've fixed that. It is now a single lane going up, and we no longer have those hidden cars trying to pass where vehicles were getting T-boned. But ultimately, the traffic keeps getting more and more and more, and they're going to need that protected left to get out, stop, and then merge. So that is the solution in this TSP for the O'Neill Junction. Other large items, classification changes, and I'll go over this on the map below. So some classification changes and then some other road extensions that are pretty key to the city. These classification changes are mostly for policy, what gets built and how land use works in those areas. They're pretty minor. And then the roadway extensions are our primary extensions, like we've been talking about 9th Street forever. The Peters Road extension, this would be going from Main west over to La Monta. The 5th Street extension, that goes through to Combs Flat. And then the Ochika Logging Road, that will actually connect over to Stearns. I actually have this, might be on there twice. I'm not sure what that one is. Of course, Combs Flat we completed, and then the signal connection on 3rd Street has been completed. So those, you'll see Combs Flat in here, but you won't see anything about the signals on 3rd Street. This is hard to see, but here's that Peters Road connection up here going west. 9th Street extension that would come through. These are those alternative routes that we need to create to relieve that traffic on Third. Really faint down here, Fifth Street doesn't go through over to Combs Flat. Ochoco Logging Road is sitting over here. All these different actions will pull traffic off of Third, pull them off of Combs, and kind of relieve that congestion in theory. Intersection improvements, some of the big ones in there are slip lanes on Tom McCall Roundabout. That is already starting to fail, especially on would be the northbound leg. And then the Main and Peters intersection, that has now actually probably has a longer life because of the Combs Flat extension. We did get the right of way to create that roundabout there. That will be development driven mostly, but that is a key intersection that will be, if it's not the next one we build, it'll be something down on Combs and Laughlin. Safety improvements, these are pretty minor. A lot of them just have to do with people understanding that there's a signal ahead, there's a stop sign ahead. Rimrock has kind of a funny arc to it. The Linden Combs Flat's probably the largest one that we were most interested in, and what we've talked about as council before, that Lynn and Combs Flat by R&R Grocery. What we can do about that intersection. There are some concepts in here about that. Street lighting and crosswalks and such. It doesn't get into the full signalization because that's not possible until you start doing land acquisition. And this is what the maps look like. I put these in there just to show how you have it. There's corresponding dots and numbers to the tables. Pedestrian bicycle, this is kind of a chaotic mess when you look at the map. So you got sidewalks, you got bicycles, you got multi-use trails. So these maps, they cross over each other. ADA ramps are in here, bicycle improvements on and off the street. And so these improvements are lengthy. They're usually the least expensive, but they are the most comprehensive when you look at it, because sidewalks are everywhere. And we try to put trails in places where we think we might need them, but we may never build them. And so you kind of put them all over. One of the key components for our multi-use path system is that we wanted to try to concentrate doing off-street paths instead of sidewalks on our arterial roads like Main Street, Combs Flat, Tom McCall. So you'll see these off-street path recommendations for those rather than curb-type sidewalks and that such. It helps with drainage as well to do it that way, and it keeps people away from the fast-moving traffic. And then you look at this one, this is sidewalk, so this is pedestrian improvements, and then this is bicycle improvements. There's overlap, as you can see, between the two maps because the multi-use paths are on both maps. Again, really comprehensive, something like M7 may never happen. You throw it on there, you get a federal grant, you do it. You'll notice the Barnes Butte Trail is no longer there because it is also completed. Public transportation, this has been growing. Our primary public transportation in the city is CET, Cascades East Transit. They're funded mostly through a payroll tax and county funding. And Dial-A-Ride is probably the biggest thing that we use, as well as the route from here to Redmond. I think there's 2 times it comes and goes, and the Dial-A-Ride is internal to the city itself. They've been trying to find ways to get out to Juniper Canyon. Fixed routes are probably a ways away. But this is heavily used, especially during school times. Like starting up here in September, you'll see a spike with kids going to see OCC, Cascade, or OSU Cascades, RPA in Redmond, and you'll see a big boost in that school age rides. Basically, they haven't quite perfected the way to do kind of help the people working, coming and going. The times that the bus has to be there is a little challenging. You have to get that ridership. So there's other options like commute options comes up where people do ride shares and things like that. So that's also a component of our public transportation plan. Freight system is looked at. It's not heavily discussed in this because they kind of have their own, it's usually on the highway side. But there are some, like we talk about facilitating trucks through roundabouts. So a lot of our roundabouts take that into account for design, including the one at Peters in Maine. That is about 60% designed. Aviation, not a whole lot in there, but because it has its own master plan that is basically governs our airport, and that generally goes through the county. And then we have our rail. Rail's mentioned in there. There's a whole section on policies for rail. The only real thing to talk about in there is we added a crossing on La Manta for the rail, which wasn't currently a project in our previous transportation systems plan. And that was to access some of the industrial on that north side. I guess that'd be northeast. Funding and implementation. So when you look at the whole project cost, it totals up to like 95.4 million. There's kind of this idea that so much would come from ODOT, so much would be funded by developers, locally led projects. So this is kind of the breakdown in what we feel would happen or could happen. And locally, we're looking at about 37 million, which doesn't total the 95. We realize that, but not all projects will be completed by the time the next update comes around. So it's not intended to be equal. Otherwise, our system development charge would be a massive amount of money. So it's you have to look at this in spans where some of these projects will be completed in certain areas of town because they developed, but other areas didn't. So funding sources, of course, ODOT partnership. That's where a lot of our funding came from for the Tomahawk roundabout, O'Neill, West Y. Those are all our ODOT streets. 3rd Street, of course, is ODOT. All that curb ramps that were done, that was ODOT. Combs Flat was actually passed through when we did some of those fundings. So our large projects come from then. Otherwise, you got fuel tax, you leverage other utility projects. So if they're doing like the irrigation line, we combined with the Combs Flat project, that's helped us save money. System development charges is the bulk of our local, other than fuel tax. And then grants. A lot of people hear arts grants. They think it's for murals, and it's not. It's road transportation safety program that you can get money from. Yep. And then, of course, the STIP. And Scott knows all about that. We don't do the Safe Routes to School very often. I don't even know if that's still available, but in this hazard mitigation stuff, the BRIC funding, I don't believe is available right now either, but they can come back around. So that's the transportation system plan kind of overview. Any questions so far? Okay. So then when you get into the comp plan update, this is chapter 6. Hasn't been updated since 2005. So it's still got the old map from 05 in there. And we've done 3 plan updates since then. So we thought it would be appropriate. So the policies were updated. The whole thing was reorganized. It's different than the other chapters in our comp plan because transportation is different. So we broke it down. We have a set of 5 goals, but instead of having policies under each goal, we have policies under each type of transportation. So rail has its own, freight has its own, aviation has its own. And that's how it was laid out to be a little easier to target where those policies are. I think I have a updated plan of how those old policies were transitioned from the old plan to the new plan. Most of them were kept. They were just reorganized or consolidated with other policies because it was very lengthy. So we wanted to streamline this. We wanted to consolidate those, make it an easier thing to read. We did have a lot of programs, and as we have done with other chapters, the programs were really tasks that shouldn't be in a comp plan. They're not really policies. And so the programs that didn't relate to a policy were just removed. They were tasks like do a transportation systems plan. That's not really something that needs to be in here. Policies addressed transportation modes, land use, funding, and service levels. So all these policies get at all the different aspects of transportation, including land use and how things are funded. Updates to the land use code. So this was something That was recommended by ODOT and DLCD, go ahead and say that, Department of Land Conservation and Development. The first section is just adding transportation plan to that section so it counts. So we have a clause in our land use code that says when you're doing a master plan project, you don't have to get it reapproved through the land use system. It doesn't say transportation in there, it just says public facility, which locally we interpret to be all of our public facility plans, but they felt it should actually state it. So that's the only correction in 153122. And the second one is a whole new section. Currently, when we do, a development comes in, we require them to do a transportation systems analysis, like study, to determine how much traffic they're going to produce on their area. And that's how we determine our system development charges and what they pay and possibly what improvements they need to make to that system. Currently, this is in our standards and specifications, and it's a very small section. This would add a significant amount of criteria and kind of open it up. It doesn't change how we operate. It just lists how we actually operate in more detail and puts it in the land use code so people see it up front and it's defensible. Like I said, the update does not change how we currently do these things. It's just putting that in the land use code. And so we get down to the Planning Commission recommendation. So ultimately, the Planning Commission recommended approval of the plan. However, they had 4 kind of discussion topics that we went through and recommendations. The first was to consider interim solutions. This was generally focused at the West Y. And the issue there being, we have issues with the West Y, and maybe we don't want to wait 10 years to make these fixes or make some kind of adjustments. So as a staff action, I already changed and added policy 17 to our chapter 6, which would basically tells us, we can't tell ODOT to fix their Y, but we can at least encourage them by having a policy that says we will accept interim solutions. So that's what policy 17 does, and I added that to chapter 6. I don't know if there's anything else you can think of that might help that, but that's one way we can show locally. The Elm Street extension, they wanted to make a higher priority. That's the image on the left. I'll get back to that in a second because it's a little more of a conversation. Proposed sidewalks on Fairview should be curb tight. This one was thrown in there just as an observation, but our standard is curb tight. So the only reason we would not do that is if there was some drainage need or some kind of design that dictated otherwise. And that's a little bit not as high level as something you'd put in the transportation plan anyway. It's more of a standard and specs item. And then 4 was accommodate overnight truck parking. Ron Cholin, as you know, has a trucking company. He has issues with there's the lack of places to park for overnight when you come into town. Now, he doesn't necessarily mean in town, but at least around. And so I went ahead and added something to the policy 5 that addresses that recommendation, kind of encouraging that type of thought process. I don't know how else we accommodate the overnight truck. It's usually on the highway. It's not something we can do, but we can at least encourage it locally that maybe that's something they provide. A lot of times ODOT doesn't take action unless the local authority has something that promotes it or at least acknowledges it. And so back up to Elm Street. This is an interesting one because they wanted to move it up on the docket. We have had this in our transportation plan for at least 20 years. And what it is Elm Street is our major collector. It's what's supposed to be gathering all the traffic from the neighborhoods and then moving it to 3rd Street, except because 3rd Street has the signal where Elm Street is, except it doesn't connect to Lynn and it's got stop signs running all the way up it. Everybody uses Fairview and then bumps over. So this was more of the Planning Commission saying either do it or get rid of it. Is kind of their attitude towards it. But we didn't study this. This wasn't a priority in the plan, so we didn't have an action or a change to make. My suggestion here would be to just leave it in as is, and this might be something we study on the side to say, maybe we do get rid of this major collector and bump it over to Fairview and then find a way. We still have to get over to the signal somehow. But that might be a separate study that could address this project. It just doesn't have to address the project the way they currently want to do it, which is to buy 4 homes and punch the road through, which obviously we haven't done in 20 years, so we may not.
Well, there's a lot, I mean, if we think about it, part of the reason Elm was that collector because the
Hospital, yep.
you know, and that's no longer the case. So we've seen some changes there. You know, I like the idea of that Fairview being in, you know, rather than extending Elm and that huge purchase of those homes, a smaller and do something on this end of Fairview to get it over to the Elm signal or something like that.
Right. And so that was kind of their thought. It's not too late to change, but we'd have to go back and look at how we'd want to do it. Keeping this as a solution doesn't hurt. It keeps that project in there. It keeps some type of solution in there. Doesn't mean it has to be this exact solution. So that is what staff would recommend and how we kind of address this and we did just change it from a long to a near to kind of bump it up on that schedule to maybe look at it sooner rather than later. And so with that, that's all I've got.
Thank you. Are there any comments from the public that you would like to include in this public hearing? Is there anyone online that would like to speak to this in this public hearing?
Just for our members on the online audience, if you can put your raised hand button on your Zoom so we know that you wish to talk, we can then unmute you. Daryl's indicating that there's nobody online that's raising their hand.
All right, so no comments from the audience, no comments from online, any comments from the council?
Did we receive any written comments? Okay. Our city clerk's indicating that there was no written comments either.
Thank you. No written comments have been submitted. Okay,
I would just comment, you know, and I was on the PAC, and we did our but there's so many unknowns with the situation that I think we're all aware of with ODOT and their funding. You know, that can make a big difference in the West Y. I mean, I know O'Neill and Rimrock and all that. So, you know, we did our best to try to allocate and pony up those funding sources, but, you know, ultimately it might all go on our back, depending on how bad we want to fix something and what happens with ODOT and their funding.
Agreed. So there is no decision to be made tonight. All we just need to do is close the public hearing. If you're done making comments, you can also leave it open if you want to provide comments later. Otherwise, I would recommend just closing the hearing. We'll bring an ordinance back if everybody's in agreement.
Josh, I just wanted to say thank you for your presentation. That
Sure.
clear, the maps were easier to read than what we have in our packets. Thank
This is, that was shorter than commission, so.
And you all certainly will bring the ordinance back, but even after closing the public hearing, obviously you're the council, you'll be able to debate this if you'd like in a couple of weeks, make any sort of comments you wish. It's just the public engagement part would be closed.
Correct.
so if there are no other comments to be made, then I will close the public hearing. And we will be hearing
next
back
time.
from you at the next meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
All right, moving on in our agenda, we have a proclamation that was requested to be presented, and that came from the mayor on Constitution Week. Any comments, recommendations for this to be presented at the next meeting?
I make a motion to,
So the motion to be made would be to approve the proclamation designating September 17, 23, 25 as Constitution Week and for it to be read at the next council meeting.
thank you.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
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 It's a nice tongue tie, sorry.
That's all right. I got it.
Any discussion? Hearing none, and all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. All right, that carries it down to staff reports and requests. The city manager's report, Mr. Forrester.
Thank you, Council President Uffelman. Again, starting with public safety and dispatch. Recruitment efforts for dispatch are progressing well with 32 applications received within a couple of weeks. And one dispatcher graduated this past Friday. So that person will be starting her time with Katie and her team. So we're happy for that. We have 2 new police officers joining our team. Shane Rutherford, a Washington State lateral officer, was sworn in last Tuesday. And Harrison Moore, a South Carolina lateral. Did you swear him in, Shane? Okay, he has been sworn in as well. And we will get those in front of council for introductions in the near future. We continue to be successful in recruiting lateral qualified people to join our police force, and this is a very positive development for us. Correct me if I'm wrong, Shane, we only have 1 remaining open position to fill. So a tremendous turnaround from where we were just a couple of short years ago. On the public works side, the ASR number 2 well drilling and pump testing is complete. The pump and motor have been ordered and should be online by spring. Again, this is a tremendous impact to our long-term water capacity for the city. Again, as we've discussed previously, the city's in a very strong position with significant amounts of water capacity to serve growth for a good long time into the future. Staff continues to work on the Aquatic and Sports Center financial feasibility study, and as that develops, we will be updating council and ultimately bringing to council for consideration. Crews are preparing our meter boxes for winter weather and cold temperatures, so to prevent freezing. We're in that process now. We're also preparing a request for proposal, RFP, for the design of extending water and wastewater infrastructure for the unconnected city residents to be able to connect to water and sewer in the future. So you were familiar with the areas in our community that either have wastewater services and no water services, or in some cases don't have either. So we want to get ahead of that, and we've worked hard in the last couple of years to do so.
Steve, is that for all unconnected city residents?
It won't be, well, I believe it's for the areas that don't have those services now.
Right.
Yeah, so I can't say with certainty that it would mean everybody. Can you, Josh?
Yeah, so it's intended to be everybody, water or sewer. So that some have one, some don't have both in the UGB.
Right, in the UGB,
So-
yep. And the reason I hesitated is because we do have some islands within the UGB that aren't in the city. So but the general area is the same. So hopefully that'll work out in the future. Okay. Now I can't find my place. Thank you, Janet.
Designed to be.
Thank you. I got it. Designs are being finalized for the Waterline Capital Improvement Project in the area of Northwest 7th, 8th, and Fairmont. Staff is looking at designs and costs for wastewater sewage receiving station, which would be an opportunity to generate revenue for the wastewater fund. And as we recall, Casey worked with Crook County to adapt our system to take some of the wastewater that was being delivered to the landfill area and treated on land applications. We have a lot of wastewater capacity in our system, so this won't have any impact on future growth. And it's a significant opportunity for us to generate additional revenue for that fund. So a win-win. Just a quick update on the railroad. We didn't have too much of a business interruption with the fire that occurred recently. Our insurance company has been busy working with us, bringing a third-party adjuster to assess any damages, as well as a third-party fire investigator. We just want to make sure that everything's cleaned up in good shape. We didn't miss anything. So again, most importantly, no interruption to railroad services for our railroad customers. Meadow Lakes, I think I sent out an email to the council, again, a record-breaking month for August, totaling $217,114 in revenue. And we continue to see this, this strength in that particular enterprise fund in Gulf and Meadow Lakes. So congratulations to Zach and his staff for doing such a great job and providing such a great value for our golfing community. Airport, obviously with the recent fire activity, our business has picked up there again, and tankers are extremely active right now. I didn't get a status update. Does anybody know exactly where we're at with the fire up in the Ochoco's? I think it's better is what I heard kind of unofficially. So hopefully, that'll get under control and out soon. The county's, new hangars are under construction as we speak. And also, I haven't mentioned this, but if you get a chance, run up the airport and look at the old, what I call the old crosswind runway, used to be 3-3, I think it's 3-4, that has been widened and reconstructed completely in. So the reason I mentioned that is because if you look at Madras, they got one runway. You look at Bend, which is a very active airport, one runway. We are very fortunate that we have two options depending on weather and wind direction to service our customers at the Crook County Airport. Planning, despite reports of national housing slowing down, the planning department has received 54 housing permits so far this year. That's a pretty strong pace for us, and it looks to be on track with what we projected and may actually exceed that if things keep going as they have been. So this is, in my way of thinking, an indicator of how strong our economy is in our community of Prineville. HR, Carrie has been busy recruiting, obviously, for PD and dispatch, and successfully as well. Our assistant city engineer, Mike Kasperger, will be retiring in April. So we will begin the process of replacing the assistant city engineer position. We congratulate Mike and appreciate all the years of service he's provided to the city. On the finance side, we have one more month of the annual third-party audit. The auditors will be here in person to complete the audit process in the month of October. And that concludes my report. I don't have any other updates. Are there any questions?
Can I make- I have
Well, of
one.
course.
So I was wondering, the dispatcher that graduated from the academy, Katie, can she also come here so that we can be introduced to her? Okay. Thank you. That's it.
Good. Any other questions? Thank you, council.
Thank you. All right, moving on, are there any council reports? Hearing none, there are no ordinances, there are no resolutions. It's the last opportunity for visitors' appearances and requests, including those online. Would anyone like to speak to the council? Is there anyone online that is indicating any intent? All right. Thank you. At this point, we will be not adjourning, but we will take a break because we're going to go into a executive session. Let me present this properly. The City Council, City of Prineville will now meet in executive session. And by the way, we will take a 5-minute break during this process to bring people online and to exclude folks who should not be online. City of Prineville will now meet in executive session pursuant ORS 192.6602H for the purpose to consult with counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed, and pursuant to ORS 192.6602F to consider information or records that are exempt by law from public inspection. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other persons shall be asked to leave the room or not permitted to listen in on our Zoom meetings. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberation during the executive session, except to state the general subject of this session as previously announced. No decisions may be made in the executive session. Designated staff allowed to attend the executive session are Jared Reed, Steve Forrester, Casey Kaiser, Josh Smith, and Lisa Morgan, and Wendy Kellington. Again, no decisions will be made in this executive session. At the end of the executive session, we will return to open session and welcome the audience back into the room. So we are adjourning into executive session. Again, we will take approximately a 5-minute break while the computer communication system is accommodated.
Then we can fly it around the cloud.
And a shoe ball.
Yeah.
People are invited back, is that, are we? Okay.
Recording in progress. Recording in progress.
Are we live now? All right. Good. We are back in open session. Is there any other business to be discussed, council, this evening? Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Moved. Second.
And moved and second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Chairman.